It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Al, I'd like to start with you. Periodically, I'd like to focus on some of these battleground states that all the presidential candidates will have to kind of navigate. And I'd like to start with Wisconsin. The Wall Street Journal poll yesterday indicated it was a dead heat between Biden and Trump. I think if we go back to Hillary Clinton's campaign, she was faulted after she lost to Donald Trump by not paying enough attention to Wisconsin. Biden came back and won that state, but as this poll indicates, it's not a given that this will be a Biden state coming up. What's your historic sense of Wisconsin, and how do you analyze the state right now?
Well, first of all, Wisconsin is probably one of the tightest of all the swing states. In 2016, Trump won it by 0.8%, less than 1%. In 2020, Biden won it by 0.6%, less than 1%. They just had their primary this week. And both Trump and Biden were essentially unopposed. Overall vote for both parties was almost even. I think on the CNN site, it said that there were maybe 8,000 more votes for the Republicans, but then the Republicans had reported a higher percentage of the precincts than the Democrats. So basically, the vote was even. The interesting thing is the vote was down even from the uncontested elections of 2020 on the Republican side, but really substantially down. I mean, basically, one of the things to look at is that Trump was at I think he won under 80% at 78.9%. Nikki Haley, who was not on the ballot, won 12%, and then there was an uncommitted vote. But that vote was only 40% of the vote that voted in the Republican primary in 2016, where Trump lost to Ted Cruz. On the Democratic side, Biden kept his vote pretty much close, not absolutely, but within a few thousand votes of what he got in 2020 in his contested contest. So obviously the overall vote in the Democratic primary was down too, because Bernie Sanders got a substantial vote in 2020. But the other interesting thing on the Biden side, and so this sort of shows that there's trouble on both sides, it was about 8.2% uncommitted. I couldn't find that in 2020 because it was a contested primary, so they didn't list may not have listed the uncommitted. But Wisconsin historically is a state of extremes. I mean, it's Joe McCarthy and Robert La Follette, the great reformer, and and Joe McCarthy, and Craig will remember Gaylord Nelson, the great liberal senator, and now Ron Johnson. And then, for years we had Bill Proxmire, who was sort of everything weird, all combined in one, in a sense. He was a guy who really, marked to his own drummer. It's also the most gerrymandered state in the country. The Republicans took control in 2010, and they gerrymandered that deal unbelievably. And in 2012, when a Democratic governor won, I believe, with over a majority, the Republicans somehow got the legislature to be 65% Republican. And they've done things with the voting laws there over the last 8 or 10 years that have, obviously Democrats don't like very much. And there was a big Supreme Court fight last year because the Supreme Court has been backing the Republican legislature, Republican elected Supreme Court. And last year there was a big fight with a Democratic candidate who won. And so this year, the court threw out the redistricting plan by the legislature, and they've just passed another. I don't know whether it's completely fair, but it will reduce the extreme gerrymandering, assuming it goes through. The other thing about the primary ballot, and I'm not going to get into details because these are too complicated and intricate to understand, really, but there were two constitutional amendments passed that the Republicans pushed that basically limit the resources for administering elections. And given that Wisconsin is going to be a contested state, I mean, for one of them, they call it Zuckerbucks, because Mark Zuckerman had a foundation that contributed to states in 2020 during the pandemic to help them administer the election and to help protect people who were voting from COVID. And the Republicans' conspiracy theorists said that through the election to Biden, and so they've eliminated all of that, and it's just going to make it harder to administer this fall. So where are we? It's where we started, where you started, Dave. This is going to be a tight election. It's going to be decided probably as it was in 2016 and 2020 by the size of the third party vote. I mean, the Republican and Democratic vote have been generally pretty consistent. Trump won even a little bit more in 2020 than he did. He won, I think, 48.8 in 2020, 47.8 in 2016. But the big difference was 2016, the third party vote approached 5%, drove Hillary down, and he won. In 2020, it was under 2%, and Biden sneaked by. So, not much different than the other swing states, but boy, it's going to be interesting. And it probably, I would say, more bitter than most of the swing states because the fights that have been going on over controlling of the election process over the last 3 or 4 years in Wisconsin have been much more bitter.
Greg, you headed up George Bush's presidential campaign. Wisconsin was probably problematic then for you, but where do you think the state is now? What's your analysis?
Well, it was challenging then. I also, a moment in history that we sometimes do. I cheered California Governor Pete Wilson's presidential campaign, short-lived as it was. But one of my tasks was to travel to Wisconsin and to try to convince one Governor, Tommy Thompson, not to enter the race, but instead to endorse Pete Wilson. The meeting gets set up. I'd not been before to the governor's mansion. I go to this beautiful estate, a beautiful home on a lake with a pier with a boat, his own boat on it. And I sat down for a meal with him, and I said, "Why in the world would you want to leave all this?" And he laughed, and he said, I figured that's why you were here." It's a beautiful state. I think I'm a little bit reminded too of a great line Senator Howard Baker had, which is everything that needs to be said has been said. I just haven't had a chance to say it because I went through sort of the same analysis that Al did. I do think that, viewers might say, "Why are you guys talking about Wisconsin?" Well, it is going to be a key state for whoever wins the presidential election. It's our 20th largest state. It has about 6 million people in it. And the interesting thing is that, it's a state that has about 87% the white population. The next largest group is about a little under 8% Hispanic, and right below that at about 7% is Black. It's a state that has a lot of agricultural activity, manufacturing activity. The economy tends to be, I think, one of the issues most on people's minds there. And by the way, I think that's ultimately going to be the case nationwide. and then so you open up, first of all, let's take the Wall Street Journal poll, which is out and just out. They looked at 7 states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Wisconsin was the only state, as Al said, the only state where there was a tie. Trump led by small margins, but led in the other states. But I actually think for Trump, that's not good news. I think for Biden, Wisconsin is a state to really take a close look at, because one of the most interesting numbers in that poll had to do with the question they ask of people, do you feel that the economy is not in good shape? Kind of an odd negative question, but is the economy, as you see it, not in good shape in the U.S., number one, and then secondly, in the state of Wisconsin? Wisconsin actually had the best score from Biden's standpoint of all the other states that were asked that question, where 40% of the people said that Wisconsin's economy is not in good shape, meaning 60% were positive. But in the U.S., they said that it was 57%. So in Wisconsin, they not only see the economy doing considerably better than they think it's doing in the United States, but they also are more favorable towards the economy than any of the other 6 close states. And so Biden's message on the economy, to some extent, must be getting through in Wisconsin. And I think that bears, some real close examination by the Biden campaign, because that's, I think, probably the most important issue there, and possibly in these other states. A lot has been said about abortion rights. Biden scored better there than on the other leading issues: the economy, immigration, and mental fitness. And that's clearly going to be an important issue. Is that going to carry the day in some of these states? I just don't know. It may get out voters. Al touched upon the other thing that I thought was so interesting in this race. He used percentages, but I'll use numbers, because in 2016, over 1 million Republicans, over 1 million Republicans came out and voted in the primary contest. And in 2024, 476,000 people voted for Trump. Kind of remarkably, another 100,000 voted for either Nikki Haley, or other candidates, none of whom are still on the ballot. When you look at the voters who actually came out and voted for someone other, the Republican voters who voted for someone other than Trump, and the Republican voters who simply stayed home, who have voted in the past, I think this is a real serious problem in a state where I think the swing vote is maybe 20,000. It's going to be close, but if Trump can't win over the people who stay home, or the people who really would prefer another Republican, in a significant number, if he can't win over a significant number of them, I don't think he can win in Wisconsin. And I think that's a very big challenge for him. And I think that even in 2020, where you had slightly more voters voting, it still was, in that case, you had an incumbent, Trump, in office running, and there's a rationale for not coming out. The last point I'd make is that Al mentioned these ballot initiatives. One of them, this whole notion of funding the election officials' security and process, that was meant to bring out conservatives. So they actually had a strategy to get more people likely to be Trump supporters out to vote. And while he clearly won the election, no question about it, in Wisconsin, behind these numbers, I think, are some real opportunities for Biden and some real concerns for Trump.
Craig, I'd like to stay with you, because this is actually an aviation question, and your long association with the Private Pilots Association. But as you know, because it's in your Substack this week, there's a MAGA movement to rename the Dulles Airport after Donald Trump. Is that possible?
The short answer is no, because it's possible that in the House of Representatives with the Republican leadership, I suppose it's possible they could move the resolution out. That is where it started. There is a bill introduced to change the name of Washington Dulles Airport to the Donald Trump Airport. Yeah, I did have some fun with it, and kind of as a mock fictitious phone call. How do you justify naming an airport after somebody with all the issues Trump has? And I've gotten probably more response to it than most other things I've done, all in favor of holding on to the name of Washington Dulles Airport. This is a kind of thing I just don't understand what Republicans in Congress are doing with all the issues in front of them that need resolution. They put this on the ballot. Now, my question for our region here is Andy Harris going to get on board? I don't think he's there yet. He's not a co-author, but can he possibly pass up this opportunity to do something else that's foolish, which this certainly is?
Al, you have the last word this time. You don't have to talk about Dulles if you don't want to.
Well, I'm trying to think of, maybe we could call it Leavenworth or some prison in honor of Trump. I just want to go back to Wisconsin for a minute for a couple of things. One is this very favorable territory for Trump. So what Craig says is something you got to worry about. Nationally, 35% of the voters are white non-college graduates, and that's Trump's base, sort of working class whites. In Wisconsin, it's 56%, and so his marketplace is there. And if he's not winning them in Wisconsin, obviously it doesn't mean he doesn't win them any other places, but let's just say he should. That's pretty favorable turf for him. The second thing I just want to mention that Craig said that I thought was really important, and I noticed it too. In the Wall Street Journal poll, when you ask people how the economy is doing nationally, they say it's terrible. How it's doing in your state, it's in almost every state it was much better. In Wisconsin, it was the best. And what that tells me is the amount of basically ideology that dominates national attitudes now. I mean, you basically are in your tribe or the other tribe nationally, but when you get down to local stuff and you actually sometimes you even talk to your neighbors who have different politics, and you really understand what's going on in your neighborhood, and you feel, things seem to be getting better. But you can't say that nationally because that's violating your tribe's orthodoxy. The one final thing I'd say about Wisconsin that we did not mention, there's also an important Senate race. And Trump was out there. I started to watch his rally on C-SPAN, but after 2 minutes of the same lies starting, it just was too much, about how he won in 2020 bigger than in 2016 and all that nonsense. But he did endorse a candidate out there who is a self-funder, a very rich man, lost to Tommy Thompson, who Craig mentioned, who was actually, I worked with Tommy Thompson because after our careers in politics, we both joined the same law firm, and a wonderful man. But in any event, he lost to Tommy Thompson in a primary for governor, I believe. And I don't know anything about him. I don't know whether he's going to be a Trumper. If he's a Trumper, they may blow an opportunity to win a seat because, the seat is a Democratic seat. It looks, the Cook report has it as leaning Democratic. And if there were a good Republican candidate, it's possible that that's one they could pick up. But I suspect that won't be the case, that he'll run like all the Republicans in Wisconsin seem to want to be running as Trumpers, and they'll blow that opportunity too.
Well, we have to leave it there. Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thank you so much indeed. We will see you next week.